Katrina, Abel, and their young family lived in Northern Ireland until Brexit prompted them to leave. The family, who now live in a coastal suburb in Melbourne, Australia, were concerned about the impact of a hard Irish border.
I'm from Derry and I grew up in the 80s, so I have a very real experience of what it was like at a time when the customs were there and the security and the checkpoints. It's a very real sense of just fear and uncertainty. I remember lots of incidents where buses were hijacked, and burnt. I remember seeing, I remember as a young kid seeing the British Army shoot at a 14-year-old boy just outside our house. And my mum running out with a blanket just to help them. The boy was in my sister's class. A visual presence of the British Army patrolling the streets with their guns. It became like the norm because I was quite young whenever I first experienced it. I remember there was one day I was coming home from school and the British Army were in their jeeps, and one of the soldiers actually tracked me with their gun. And after hearing stories from my parents that, they could accidentally the trigger could just go off and maybe, they could shoot you, so don't make any sudden movements when they're tracking you, like giving you that kind of advice as if it's normal, it's not. I think the soldier was you've got to remember that some of these soldiers are just like kids themselves. They're maybe 17, 18. They've just been thrown out in the field, and this is their first experience of, of actually just doing that type of a role as a soldier. They've possibly also experienced some attacks by the local children, I remember kids used to throw stones at the soldiers all the time and then they would follow them. So yeah, it's just they felt obviously under threat at times too. But in that incident, I was just walking along and I think he was genuinely just tracking me. I don't think he was going to shoot me, but at the time I felt like there was a real possibility that I could be shot, and I had fear. I just remember that sense of just something's not right, and I just wanted to be around the corner, out of the way, out of his line of sight. These are all the kind of things that you just don't want your kids to grow up with. You just don't think that there could be a return to that situation ever again, but the problem is that there could be if the customs are actually reinstated.
A border in this place is really the worst thing that can happen. It's we used to go on weekends just across the border, go grab a breakfast or go to the beach or go see people. Putting breakfast with checkpoints with the police, potentially the army or whatever it is. This just really, it's ridiculous, really. The fact that they even contemplate that, nobody can really understand.
Since the EU referendum result was announced, Katrina has started to notice some changes.
I think in one of the areas in Derry, especially from where I'm from, there's been noticed that there's a lot of tension. It's called the bog side. So basically, there's definitely been a lot more attacks around the city. Over the last 12 months in particular, there's been a lot more reported in the news. For me, one of the things that I actually noticed physically was that the police barracks in the waterside in Derry, they actually erected a concrete wall outside the police barracks, and that is definitely something that has been a response to the increased tension and threats on the street that they feel that they're facing, or potentially that might happen as a result of whenever Brexit actually comes into force.
Katrina had never expected to be in this situation. The Leave vote took her by surprise.
We just initial shock, thinking, how can this even happen? We knew there was a debate on it. We just didn't assume that the people were going to vote towards Brexit. So we thought, how is this going to impact us and our family? And we decided that there's too much uncertainty. The risk of a return to violence, for my kids especially, we decided we've got to take this seriously, and that was the catalyst for us then to make a move to come here to Australia.
It's the same decision her parents once made.
We moved to Australia when I was about 7, and that's the reason. I remember there was just another story where my father was called out just to report on some violence, and he said, I cannot do this anymore. It's the same story. No side is any better than the other. I think it's time we just move out and move away from this, because I don't want this for my family.
The couple was also concerned about Brexit's impact on the economy and Abel's right to work.
There's been major disruption for people who have to cross the border every day, for businesses, for people that cross even for pleasure. And that kind of uncertainty is definitely something that people are concerned about. My own personal experience was we decided, because we were homeowners, that we had to sell our house. We were concerned whether or not the economy was going to start to be affected once Brexit happened, normally the markets do get a little bit, they react to any kind of uncertainty in the news, so we were sure that it was going to affect Britain economically as well as politically.
I was constantly traveling from Northern Ireland into London and to somewhere else, so I was crossing a lot of borders for work. So I really loved my work, but when the Brexit decision was made, this meant that there would be more checks, potentially work permit obligations. I never applied for British permanent residency. There was no need because I was an EU citizen, and therefore there was free borders, free movement, basically were free to move and work and live anywhere you wanted. So that way it was a really new change in our circumstances, which was a bit of an unexpected result in 2016, considering we had just bought a house. So my wife and I, we decided this uncertainty was just too much, and my wife and I decided to accelerate our plans to move to Australia. So absolutely 100% convinced that coming to Melbourne was the right thing to do. We should have done it earlier. If we had known there would be a Brexit, we would never have moved to Northern Ireland in the first place. We would have done something else.
Now living on the other side of the world, they are still concerned about the consequences of Brexit for border communities.
What the community wants is they want some kind of reassurance. They want to know that there's going to be no physical hard border. Even any hardening of the border is going to be detrimental to the people that live there. So they just want assurances that the status quo is going to continue, and that there's no hardening of any borders, customs checks points, not just now, but in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time.